This story is entitled Nana the Singing Goat by Colin Pearce. Nana was a beautiful little goat. Her mother was a pedigreed Tannenberg Angora cross of royal bloodlines, and her father was the son of the noted Morgan Thasba III, the grandest goat champion of champion goats. Nana lived in the backyard of the hotel. When she was big enough, she would be let out into the goat pasture with the other goats, but the children had asked Dad if they could keep her as a pet when she was a kid. "All right," Dad had agreed, "but I don't want her treated like a baby. She has to go out to pasture one day and have kids of her own, you know. I don't want her to be a nuisance." The children were delighted and called their new pet Nana. She was so pretty. Her coat was a soft gray color, her ears hung down like two warm oven gloves, and her eyes were a rich violet color, almost black and full of a goaty sort of love. And everyone who saw her loved her. Everyone except Dad. You see, although Nana was beautiful, she was a bit silly. She ate things, not just goat food things, but other things. Things in the garden, like bulbs and blossoms and bushes, plants and petals and pots, and things off the wash line, like socks and stockings and sheets, tea towels and trouser legs and tablecloths. She nibbled on this, munched on that, took a bite here, took a gnaw there, ate up, fed on, gulped down, tucked into, picked at, champed, chomped, chewed, and swallowed everything. When they tied her up, she ate the rope and started off again. But that's not what made Dad mad. Although he didn't like Nana eating things, there was something else Dad was really mad about. You see, Nana sang. Now, goat singing is not good singing at the best of times, but Nana's singing was awful. It wasn't so much how she sang, or what she sang, or where she sang. It was when she sang. She sang in her sleep, and she only slept at nighttime because she was too busy eating things in the daytime to sing then, and so she only sang at night when everyone else was asleep. And what did she sing? It's almost too strange to tell. Every night she dreamed that the sky caught on fire. In her dream, the sky filled with fiery lights of reds, oranges, yellows, and greens. And she dreamed that the sky sang. Yes, sang. And Nana loved the fires and the singing so much that she joined in too. Na, 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 she would sing, na, na. She thought she made beautiful music, but it was tuneless, toneless, terrible, and very loud. And she did it every night. Nothing Dad or the children could do would make Nana stop once she started. Dad kept a supply of stones and bones on his window ledge to throw at her in the night. But even when the stones hit her, she didn't notice. And even when he shouted at her, she wouldn't stop. Guests in the hotel did not like being waked up by Nana's singing, and they complained to Dad. Some of them left the hotel. There were lots of visitors coming to town soon, and Dad was afraid that people would not want to come to the hotel to stay. At last, one night, in a very bad temper, Dad stomped through the house and stomped and stamped out into the backyard. He grabbed Nana's collar and dragged her roughly into the shed. He was very cross. He threw her into a corner full of junk. He hooked a rusty chain to her collar and tied her to a post. "There," he shouted. "You're off to the butcher tomorrow, you pest. You're not good for anything but chops and sausages. And then a man might get some peace at night and run his business properly." He slammed the door shut and said bad words all the way back to bed. Poor Nana. She stood there in the shed in the dark, bruised and breathless, with big goaty tears spilling out of her violet eyes. A minute ago she had been singing with the sky music, and now she knew she would never sing again. Poor Nana. She stood there in the dark, shivering and shaking, dozing off now and then, but not really sleeping. The first sound to say it was morning was the shed door scraping open. There he stood, the butcher, with blood on his hands and knives in his belt. Nana shut her eyes and waited. She knew about butchers. Some of her uncles had been taken to the butcher, and she had never seen them again. Dad and the butcher began to poke Nana and feel her all over. "There's not much meat on her," said the butcher. "I can only give you a few dollars. The only good thing about her is her wool. Why don't you keep her yourselves, just for the wool?" "Because she's too noisy," Dad snapped. "I've got other goats for wool." All right, but I won't need her till tomorrow. The town will be full of visitors tomorrow, and when they're hungry, they'll eat anything. I'll come pick her up in the morning." "Pick her up any time," said Dad. Nana tried to think of other things all day. The thought of being eaten was sickening. She felt so sick she couldn't eat anything herself. She wouldn't touch the grass or the water that the children brought her, and when they offered her a whole geranium plant to herself, she just hung her head, closed her eyes, and cried. The only thing she hoped for was to fall asleep at night and dream her wonderful sky dream for the last time. And that's what happened. The children patted her good night. Darkness fell. The shed fell quiet, and Nana fell asleep. She didn't hear the shed door open early in the evening. She didn't hear the donkey walk in. She didn't hear the man and the lady talking quietly. She didn't hear the man rustling straw and spreading out blankets to make a bed. She didn't notice when they began to move about and talk later in the night. But she did hear the sky music, and she did see the sky catch on fire. And what a sight it was! It was the best she had ever seen it. There were reds and yellows and oranges and greens, as usual. But this time there were silvers and golds and purples and whites. There were flashes of light and sparkles of color. There were sparks like rainbows and a brilliant, burning, bright star in the center of it all. It seemed so real. She wondered if it were really a dream after all. And the sky music was so loud and so beautiful that Nana joined in straight away and sang at the top of her voice. "Na, na, na," she sang, "na, na, na." She was so busy with singing and loving the sky music that she didn't notice the kind brown hands unhook her chain and lead her out of the corner. Half waking and half sleeping, she began to realize that her dream was not a dream at all. She could see the cracks in the roof, and there was real sky music, and there were real fiery lights in the sky, and right in front of her was a gracious lady, and in her lap, a new human baby. Nana was only a goat, but she knew something important had happened. Deep in her heart, she knew that all the sky music that had ever been and would ever be was for this baby. The gracious lady reached out and touched Nana's warm ears and spoke to her. "Little goat, thank you for singing your lovely song for my baby boy. Your singing made him happy." It seemed to Nana that all the kindness in the world was in the lady's voice and in the baby's face. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, "because your people have given their lives for my people's sins for such a long time. Now my baby has come into the world to take my people's sins away forever. Your people will never again suffer for our sins, and my people need not be afraid to die." Because Nana was only a goat, she didn't really understand, but just hearing the words made her feel better. Strangely, she no longer felt afraid of the butcher. She gave out a little song of happiness. "Na, na," she sang. The lady smiled. Nana lay down and rested her head in the lady's lap. She fell asleep to the suckling sounds of the baby taking milk from his mother. The first sound to say it was morning was the shed door scraping open, and there he stood, the butcher, with blood on his hands and knives in his belt. This time, Nana wasn't afraid. Nana waited by the lady's side while the man with the kind hands spoke to the butcher and to Dad. Suddenly, the butcher marched away crossly, and the man with the kind hands gave Dad some money. He had paid the money to save Nana's life. "We couldn't let that pretty face go off to the butcher shop now, could we, little goat?" the man said to Nana. "You're ours now. You can be the baby boy's pet. He likes you, and I think you know who he is, don't you?" Nana was so happy she started to eat the man's shoe, and the lady laughed. After a few days, the little family moved away and took Nana with them. She grew up as the baby boy grew up. She still ate everything and sang every night. She had kids of her own as the years went by, and they too became the boy's pets. He learned to walk, holding Nana's collar. He learned to run, chasing Nana. He learned to play as Nana butted him gently with her head. The man with the kind hands milked Nana, and the boy grew strong from drinking her milk. The beautiful lady clipped the fine wool from Nana's coat every year and knitted warm boots and gloves and coats as the boy grew bigger. Each year she would unravel the garments and knit or weave something for the next size, always adding fine new wool from Nana's coat. When the boy was nearly a man, and Nana had lived a very rich and contented life, she died. From her last clip of wool, and from the fine wool of the past years, the gracious lady wove the young man a lovely long coat. He wore it everywhere, and Nana would have been very proud of him. The boy turned into a man, a good man who pleased God and loved people. When he spoke, they listened. And if they were sick, he touched them and prayed over them, and they got better. He was easy to spot in a crowd. People saw him in the coat and ran up to him to listen to his wise words and loving sayings. Later in his life, bad men came with blood on their hands and knives in their belts, and they killed him. He died, just as the gracious lady had said, so that you and I need never be afraid to die, and so that our sins would be forgiven. And at the place where he died, the bad men gambled and squabbled about who would steal his lovely long coat, the coat made from Nana's fine wool.